Year 5 and welcome to your second English lesson. So we're now going to be looking at using semicolons and colons in our writing, okay? So this is what a semicolon looks like. So a semicolon contains a comma, okay? So comma at the bottom and a full stop on the top, okay? Now it's helpful to remember this because a semicolon, okay, this is going to help you. A semicolon is stronger than a comma, but not as final as a full stop. Okay, so it's almost more important than using a colon, but it doesn't get used to symbolize the end of a sentence. Okay, so they're used to link sentences together are closely related. So when you're trying to expand on a sentence or add additional information, it's got to be closely relevant or related to that original part of our sentence. For example, the wood was silent and absolutely still. Little Red Riding Hood realized that she had not truly seen its beauty until now. So that link there with the it, she's describing the wood, so it's additional information that's being added on. It's another clause that links to the original clause. Okay, so what it basically does is it transitions between the sentences, but it's not a full stop because it's not quite different between the two sentences because it's expanding on it. Now, a full stop might take away from that impact of her observation. We don't want it to be the wood was silent and absolutely still, full stop. Little Red Riding Hood realised she'd not truly seen its beauty until now. You almost want it to flow. So using the comma here would be incorrect, okay, because we're not using it to link two independent clauses together, okay? But we use it here to have that smooth transition between our sentences. Now, semicolons can also be used to link a sentence together using what we call a conjunctive adverb. So it's where we use an adverb in the form of a conjunction, okay? So the wolf liked Little Red Riding Hood. Nevertheless, he was looking forward to eating her. Now here you can see we've got nevertheless, okay? This is our adverb, okay? Now we're going to use it so that it becomes part of our conjunctive adverb, and we're going to use our semicolon. So the wolf liked Little Red Riding Hood. Nevertheless, he was looking forward to eating her. So you can see it flows more because there isn't that long pause in that full stop of the sentences, and it joins them quite nicely together. Now let's have a look at it if we did it with a full stop. So Little Red Riding Hood didn't like the forest much. However, she did like visiting her grandma. So now if we were to change that and use it with using our semicolon, Little Red Riding Hood didn't like the forest much. However, she did like visiting her grandma. So we almost change that idea of using a full stop and using the semicolon because we're still expanding on the information from that original sentences, okay? So there are other examples of conjunctive adverbs that you could use to precede, so it means to come after a semicolon. So you could use otherwise, therefore, moreover, nevertheless, thus, beside, accordingly, consequently, instead, or hence. So those are going to be our main words that we're going to remember when we come back to school and we have a go at starting with our new writing. If we're going to be expanding some additional information onto the sentence and we know we're going to start with an adverb opener, maybe we can look at using our semicolon punctuation. Now, we don't always have to use a conjunctive adverb, okay? Now, we can use other words, okay? And we can use different sentences with semicolon where it's not followed by that conjunctive verb. For example, Grandad is going bald. His hair gets thinner each time we see him. So that's almost two separate sentences. But this one expands on that first sentence. So Grandad's going bald. Well, how do you know he's going bald? Well, his hair's getting thinner each time we see him. So you're almost expanding on a reason or a purpose for that first main clause sentence. So we've used ourselves the colon there, the semicolon. We had too many fumbles. We lost the game. Now we could say we had too many fumbles, full stop, we lost the game. So this is now a consequence. So we could change it. We had too many fumbles, consequently we lost the game. So, but this is a consequence. This is the reason why. Because they had too many fumbles, they lost the game. We've added the semicolon. Sean wants to call our new puppy Scritch. I hated the name. So again, the commonalities between them here is the name. We've got Scritch and we've got the name, so we've expanded on it. Well, I'm going to give an opinion. Sean wants to call it this name, but I hate that. Okay, and I could say but. I could add it with a conjunction, but I've used my semicolon. I am so sorry. Will you ever be able to forgive me? So we're linking the idea of being sorry and forgiveness, so they're both still relevant to each other, so we can use our semicolon. Okay. Now a semicolon can be also used to separate items in a list. Okay, but this is where lists contain commas. Okay. So there are lots of characters in the story, colon. So we're going to explain colons in a minute, but obviously we're now about to write a list, okay? So we have the big bad wolf and the baddie. We have the big bad wolf, comma, the baddie. So that's linking to the big bad wolf. But because we've had to add that additional comma in there with this extra information, we can't put a comma here. Okay, we've got to separate that as being one chunk. So we've added in our semicolon. Little Red Riding Hood, the heroine, so additional information, but we've got the comma, so we need our semicolon. Grandma, the victim, semicolon, and Mr. Woodcutter, the rescuer. So had we just done it as Mr. Big Bad Wolf, Little Red Riding Hood, Grandma, and the Woodcutter, we'd have just used commas. But because we added additional information about those main characters with our comma, we can't use the same punctuation again. Otherwise, we'd have commas all the way throughout our work. Okay, now we spake to the main characters, Grandma, 81, so the age. Now again, because we've got that additional information of her age and the comma, we can't use the comma again. Big Bad Wolf, 30, semicolon. Little Red Riding Hood, 11, semicolon. And Mr. Woodcutter, 55. So that comma there is separating additional information about those people, so we can't then use the comma again. Now let's explain then what a colon is, because we've just looked at the colon. So the colon looks like two full stops, one above the other, a bit like buttons on a jacket, okay? Now it's helpful to remember that colons look like two full stops, okay? And it's a bit like remembering them like they're buttons, so you know there's one above the other. And they can only be used at the end of an independent clause, okay? So a main clause, okay? So they can be used to expand a sentence. Okay, now a colon is used to introduce a new idea, okay, or an idea that's an explanation, or it continues on from something else that came before the colon. For example, there was only one thing the wolf wanted to do now: eat juicy Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, so we've given him reasons to what it was that he wanted us to do. Okay, now we couldn't have used a semicolon there because it's almost like a cause and reaction here. Okay, so that's why we've got our colon in there. The flaw in the wolf's plan was clear to see. He looked nothing like Grandma. It's not additional information, but it's almost like what the next sentence would be. Okay, so it explains, well, what's the clear plan? Here, what is it he wanted to do? He wanted to eat her. What was clear with the plan? He didn't look anything like Grandma. So it's when we're giving an explanation to whatever that first part of the sentence was. Okay, it's not a slight link. It's almost like an answer to that first part. Now we can also use colons in a list like we just saw. Okay, now there are a few reasons that the wolf did not make a convincing Grandma. So I'm going to list those reasons, aren't I? So the first one is his gruff voice and his sharp pointy teeth. Now because I've made a list there with my commas, I've used my colon. Now I could use bullet points, but if I'm writing this in a story, I'm going to have bullet points all the way down my list. So that's why I use the colons, okay? Miss Humphrey wanted to go to the shop this evening, and on her shopping list she had colon. I'm going to list what I had on my shopping list, okay? Little Red Riding Hood carried a selection of provisions for Grandma. So we're now going to explain what that selection is. There's going to be a list of what she's got in that basket. So, colon, let's make the list. She had a loaf of bread, she had some apples, and a freshly wrapped pat of butter, okay? So you can see there how the colon can be used as a list, or the colon can be used to explain the sentence before, so it gives a reason or an explanation to what's just happened. So let's just look at this table to help you understand when you would use them. So you would use a colon to introduce a list. Okay, not a semicolon, a colon. Okay. Now if you imagine a semicolon, semi is half. So when we look at a semicolon, you've got a full stop and a comma. So you've got half, you've got one of each. Okay, so that's a semicolon. But a colon, you've got the same of one thing, and it's both those full stops. Okay. Now a semicolon you could use to separate items in a list. So remember if we had Grandma, the main character, Big Bad Wolf, the baddie, because you had that additional information with the commas, we have to separate them with a main clause, okay? Now we could also use a semicolon to link closely related sentences where we might be adding additional information to expand on it, okay? Now here we would use a colon to expand on an idea given, so that's when we would explain what the first sentence meant, okay? It was clear that the wolf's plan was clear to see. He didn't look anything like Grandma. Okay, it's almost like a cause and effect. Now we then use a colon to our two full stops to expand on that given idea, or to introduce a quotation to when we're going to quote something. And here for semicolon we'd use to join sentences together with an adverbial. So we had our conjunctive adverbs. Okay, so those are the different types that you would use and when you would use them in the right context. Okay, so let's have a look at these ones and see if you can work it out. Which one is punctuated correctly? So I love the sound of the birds singing. However, I hate being woken up by them. I love the sound of birds singing. However, I hate being woken up by them. This one uses the semicolon. This one uses the colon. Pause the video. Which one's correct, A or B? Okay, it is indeed A. Okay, A is correct because we've talked about loving the sound of the birds. Okay, but now we're going to give a contrasting idea. Okay, so we're linking these two sentences closely together because we're still talking about the birds, but this time we hate being woken up by them, and that them is that link back to the birds. That's the link between the two clauses. Okay, what about this one? The woods here are beautiful, peaceful, quiet, and lush. Okay, so have a think about what peaceful, quiet, and lush is and give you the clue. The comma in the and might give this one away. So pause the video. Which one's the correct one? Okay. So the answer here is B, okay? Peaceful, quiet, and lush, okay, is a list, isn't it? Okay, it's a sentence of 3, okay? So we've got peaceful, quiet, and lush. So we've got our 3 adjectives there, okay? So it's adjective, comma, adjective, and, okay? So this one here would be incorrect because obviously we're making a list, okay? What about this one? Mother's words came to me, take care in the woods. Now, is it going to be punctuated with a semicolon or is it going to be punctuated with a colon? Pause the video and see if you can work it out. Okay, so the first one is incorrect, okay, because we've used speech, so it's a quotation, and we know from looking at the slide beforehand that we use quotations when we use colons when we're quoting something, so we're using speech, okay. Right, let's have a look at this one. Little Red Riding Hood took the map with her. It was not very helpful. So we're going to use a colon or a semicolon. Pause the video and work it out. Okay, it is indeed the first one. We've linked those sentences together. The it is linking to the map. She's talking about the map, so she's giving additional information. Okay. So your task that I would like to do now is I'd like to have a go at this sheet. Okay, and it's using semicolons, colons, and dashes. It might have a little bit of our work from yesterday in it. So the first section here, you need to have a go inserting a semicolon into the correct places in our sentence. Okay, and then in this one, you need to insert the colons in the correct place in these sentences. Okay, so you might find they're in these sentences, but they're either incorrect or they might be in the wrong place, or they don't exist at all. Okay, so have a go at those questions, see how you get on, and then tomorrow's lesson we're going to be looking at the passive and the active voice. So we're going to have a different grammar focus for our lesson tomorrow. All right, good luck, year 5.